Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to our next online lesson. Today we're going to talk about healthy relationships. And this is essentially that social health that we started talking about in our psychological health module. So social relationships, having strong, healthy relationships, have an impact on both your mental health and also your physical health. Let's start though by defining what a relationship is. Sometimes when we say relationship, maybe we think our parents or our siblings or a romantic relationship or our best friend. But it's important to understand that social relationships, the relationships that can impact our health, are simply connections that exist between people who have recurring interactions that are perceived by the participants to have personal meaning. So, who in your life do you see on a somewhat regular basis that maybe influence your health? So, that could be your parents, your siblings, but it could also be a doctor or a counselor or a professor or a mentor or a coach or any number of people. So, we really want to expand our definition of relationship because a lot more than just our very close relationships can actually impact our health. So first, let's take a look at how relationships impact our physical health. There's a whole lot of research out there, and it points to the fact that having strong relationships actually decrease your risk of dying, so you live longer, decrease your risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, actually increases your immune response. So the question then becomes why? Why is there such a strong relationship between having people in your life to support you and your physical health? So often we offer three different explanations. We call them behavioral explanations, psychosocial explanations, and physiological explanations. So let's talk about each of these separately. So first you have the behavioral explanation. Very simply put, your social ties influence your health habits. We see this all the time in college, right? Let's say that you have a roommate who really likes to exercise. Maybe it motivates you to exercise. Let's say that you have a group of friends who really like to party. You're probably going to do the same thing, right? So our social ties influence our health habits. Right now, you're at home. Maybe your family eats well, you're going to eat well too, right? So that's the very simple explanation. Kind of looking a little bit deeper at this, your social ties actually give you a sense of responsibility towards someone else that lead you to engage in behaviors to both protect yourself and other people. So let me give you an example of this. So you may remember that I have 3 children. I told you all that at the beginning of the semester when we met together. My sons are almost 7, almost 5, and 3. And so I have a great responsibility for these 3 little boys. So I choose to engage in behaviors to stay healthy and also to teach them to be healthy, right? I want to be around for a really long time to see my grandchildren, to be able to keep up with my boys at the playground. And so my sense of responsibility to my social ties actually changes my behavior. So 2 ways to look at this behavioral explanation. Okay, psychosocial explanations. What does that mean? That just means that there's an interaction between social and psychological factors, or your social health impacts your mental health, and a lot of this comes back to that social support. That relationships are emotionally sustaining. They actually reduce the impact of stressors. You feel loved, you feel cared for, you feel listened to. When you're going through a stressful situation, your stress response is less because you have social support. Here's what we have to understand though. This is a 2-way street, right? So social support can certainly help enhance your psychological processes, decrease depression, decrease anxiety. However, that psychological help can actually have a negative impact on your social support, can sometimes cause you to isolate yourself, So while yes, social support is a strong mediator of your psychological health, we have to make sure that we're nurturing our psychological health so that we're able to form strong relationships. Again, this is a two-way street. It's a reciprocal relationship. So we can't compartmentalize these things. We have to think about all of them and how do they impact each other. Okay, so third is the actual physiological explanation. Like, how is your body actually changed when you have social support? Well, here's the thing. When you go through a stressful situation, we talked about this in a previous lesson, you go through something called cardiovascular reactivity, meaning your heart responds very strongly. Your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases. The interesting thing is that social support actually is protective on the heart. It decreases cardiovascular reactivity. There's a hormone called oxytocin. That's actually a stress hormone, but it's a heart protective hormone that's activated by social relationships. So having people to walk through stressful situations with you actually reduces your body's physiological response to a stressor. Relationships reduce disease progression in older adults. Social support has been linked to increased immune function. So there's some really, really neat physiological explanations for why relationships have such an impact on your physical health. So if we look at mental health, again, it's the same mediating factors. It's the reduction of the impact of stress. So strong social relationships are going to give you a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, and that all might lead to decreased depression, decreased anxiety. So how about if you don't have strong connections? What if you have weak connections, unhealthy connections? Those can be incredibly stressful. And here's the interesting thing. This is a really common feeling in college. So that National College Health Assessment that I've talked about so much, one of the questions they asked in the fall of 2017 was about loneliness. 70.5% of college students, remember that was almost 50,000 students they surveyed, reported feeling very lonely at any time in the last 12 months. Again, this is a really common feeling. That stress can undermine your sense of control, can undermine your mental health, actually can lead you to engage in some pretty unhealthy behaviors. So social isolation, there's a lot of research on social isolation. So what is that, first of all? It's the relative absence of social connections. Right? So social isolation doesn't mean that we're sitting in our house by ourselves, right? Social isolation means that you don't have those people that you can reach out to and be vulnerable to and that you can really talk to in hard situations. It's having absence of healthy connections. So what does the research say about isolation? So isolated individuals are more likely to die early. Okay, so it shortens lifespan. Your sleep patterns are disrupted when you're isolated. Your immune system is altered. You have higher levels of stress hormones. You have increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So kind of mirrors the benefit of strong, healthy relationships. The alarming thing is that the number of Americans that are reporting loneliness has doubled since the 1980s. So think about it for a second. Why do you think this is happening? Why do you think so many more people are reporting loneliness? If technology came to mind, you're right. So we live in a very connected age, but a very technologically connected age, which is very different than face-to-face relationships. So here's a couple interesting things to consider. It's not a coincidence that loneliness began to surge 2 years after Apple launched its first personal computer. Excessive internet use increases feelings of loneliness because it disconnects us from the real world. Technology is a neutral thing, right? It's not good, it's not bad, but it can't replace our healthy relationships. It can't replace our face-to-face conversational relationships. I hope this cartoon gives you a little bit of a chuckle. So Iowa State did a study because they realized that a lot of their students were reporting loneliness, and they just didn't understand why are so many college students who are surrounded by other people all the time, why are they lonely? So their objective was to think of personal, academic, and social factors that affected loneliness. So what they found is not going to be surprising whatsoever to you. What decreased loneliness? Having friends in the same dorm, being involved in a club or a group, having a regular study group. So recurring interactions with the same people, right? Seeing people on a regular basis. Well, what increased loneliness? Again, no surprise here. Spending lots of time playing video games, constantly using social media, gaming online and not in person. So things that disconnect us personally, maybe we're connected socially or technologically, but disconnect us personally from other people. Here's a thing to consider too. When we want to form a healthy relationship, it really has to start with how we feel about ourselves. How you feel about yourself and your self-confidence and your self-esteem and your self-efficacy really plays a role in your relationships. This is what we call the low self-esteem cycle. If we lack self-confidence, it's going to result in negative self-talk, maybe low achievement. We're going to start to see others in a negative light. That is ultimately going to lead to unhealthy relationships. So we really have to consider how we feel about ourselves and our own self-esteem, because that is what we're going to bring into a relationship. So the relationships that have the biggest impact on your health over your lifespan are going to change, right? So probably up until this point, your family has had the biggest influence. So the first 18 years or so of your life, they've probably had a big influence on things like your values and your moral values and your communication style. Right now, in this 4 years of college, your friends have a really big influence on your health. When you're on campus, you're around them 24 hours a day. They influence your behavior. They influence the way that you think. So your friends have a really big influence. Think maybe 10 years down the road, maybe you're married or have a romantic partner. They're going to have a big influence on your health. So the point being that these relationships change. These are all really important relationships. I want to spend just a minute talking about both friend relationships and also romantic relationships. So maybe the most influential relationship when you're in college are friendships. And friendships can be difficult to make, right? You come into college and maybe you've had the same friends for 18 years and they're really close, and you come into college and you try to make those same type of friends very, very quickly. Friendships can be stressful. Friendships can be hard. So it's important to evaluate our friendships and know what a healthy friendship looks like. So healthy friendships have respect, they have trust, they have honesty, they enjoy spending time with each other, they're safe, they're comfortable, but they have healthy relationships outside of that friendship. It's by no means exclusive, right? Unhealthy friendships, unfortunately, which we do see in college, there's jealousy. There's too much take, not enough give. There's not a healthy balance there. They take up too much of your time. They peer pressure you. That's a big red flag. You can't communicate well. So thinking about these healthy friendships, they're going to do a lot to decrease your stress, right? They're going to have a positive impact on your physical health, your mental health. Whereas these unhealthy friendships, they're going to increase your stress. Okay, so we want to evaluate our friendships. Let me talk just for a second about romantic relationships. Certainly not the point of this lecture, but it's worth talking about because you may enter into one in college. First, it's important to understand that a healthy romantic relationship looks very, very much like a friendship, right? You have all those same key values: trust, honesty, respect. But there's also has to be an independence and a maturity, right? You have to maintain who you are in a relationship. You don't change who you are just because you enter into a romantic relationship. So maintain your own independence. There should be good self-esteem and mutual respect for another person. You should be assertive and flexible in what you want and what you need. You should be able to voice those things. If you can't voice that opinion, that's a red flag. Shared spiritual values, if that's something important to you, that's one of those deal breakers. You should enjoy spending time with the person, of course. There's another big key to any relationship that is missing from this list, and it may occur to you that it's communication. So communicating well, listening well, being able to manage conflict, this is a key to any relationship, not just romantic, not just a friendship, but with your family and with your professors and with a counselor or a mentor or a coach. This is a key. So let me give you a few tips for building communication skills. These are things you've heard before, certainly not rocket science, but I think it's worth reiterating how to communicate well. First of all, be careful of your body language. Right? If you're sitting with your arms crossed and you're twiddling your thumbs and you're looking up at the ceiling, the other person's certainly not going to think you're listening, and in honesty, you're probably not. Be an engaged listener. Put down the distractions. Nobody wants to have a conversation with someone who's staring at their phone. Be willing to engage actively and to listen well. Ask for clarification if something is confusing to you or it hurts your feelings. Just ask them to state it in a different way. Maybe you misinterpreted. Don't walk away from that conversation mad or confused because maybe you didn't really hear what they were trying to say. Avoid interrupting or redirecting the conversation. Let someone say their piece before you respond back. Don't be afraid to say what you actually think. I already mentioned this one, but this is a red flag. You should be able to assert your wants and your needs and share your opinion. And realize that everybody communicates differently, right? Every single one of us has a different communication style. Maybe you are very, very detail-oriented and you like to hear all the details of someone's day, and maybe someone else is very fact-oriented and they're just not really a big communicator. That can cause an issue in relationships sometimes. So be willing to ask about their communication style, be willing to maybe make some sacrifices or to change a little bit of your own communication style so that you can communicate well with another person. I'm going to go through a series of questions, and I want you to really start to think about who are the most important relationships in your life. And answer these questions very honestly. Do some self-reflection on your relationships. Do you treat each other with respect? Do you have privacy in your relationship? Do you encourage other friendships? Are there more good times than bad times? Do you trust each other? Are you honest with one another? Can you resolve conflict? If you answered no, certainly think about why. Why did you say no? Is this relationship impacting you in a stressful way? Is it doing more harm than good to your physical health and your mental health? So it's important to examine your relationships. Unhealthy relationships sometimes start very small, right? So just feeling like pressure to change who you are, or feeling a little bit controlled or stifled or isolated. Maybe you feel like you don't have personal space or you can't really voice your own opinions. Here's the thing. These can escalate very, very quickly, right? Something that seems really small can actually escalate very quickly. So it's really important to really think about our relationships and do some self-reflection. So as we end, I'm going to give you a chance to do an emotional intelligence assessment, an EQ assessment, and you'll find this in the assignment in this module. And here's the thing. Emotional health and social health are so intricately tied. Your emotional intelligence talks a lot about your social competence, your social awareness, how you manage relationships. So it's really important to know your strengths and weaknesses and then to think critically about them. So take some time, complete the EQ assessment, and also do the critical thinking questions and upload those to Canvas for your points for this module.